Check, check.
Check 1 2 check.
Morning, everybody. All right, I'm always excited for this session. It's a very popular session with a dear friend of mine and probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the SBA space. And we always keep this consistent because SBA is a viable product. No matter if you do business loans or even real estate loans, it's a popular product within the brokerage community. So let me give a proper introduction. Coleman Publishing is the leading provider of information to small business bankers to help them make less risky small business loans. They are the largest producer of training courses and webinars for small business bankers. They sell data about small business loan performance to lenders. Their premium content trade newsletter, the Coleman Report, which I'm sure most of us get, began in 1993 and provides critical analytical information for today's small business lending professional. They issue one daily email, Coleman Report Morning Brief, and the Coleman Report Afternoon Brief to small business lending professionals around the country. So the man behind all this, Bob Coleman, Editor-in-Chief of the Coleman Report. A little bit about Bob before we bring him up here. He's the author of Money, Money Everywhere and Not a Drop for Main Street. Coleman is the editor of the Coleman Report, a trade newsletter for small business bankers. He is the nationally recognized expert on small business financing. He has appeared on Fox Business News and CNN and has been quoted by all major financial media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Bloomberg. He has spoken at numerous small business banking events across the United States, including the international engagements in the UK and Germany. Coleman has a BA in medieval history, which is interesting. I never asked you about that, Bob. From the University of California, Santa Barbara, and an MBA in real estate and finance from the University of Southern California. And I'm sure, again, like I said, we've all gotten his newsletters and very insightful information. So let me introduce my friend, colleague, and supporter of NACLB. Please give a round of applause for Mr. Bob Coleman.
Thank you, Chris. That was very nice. This is the 8th annual event that I believe Chris has put on. I've been privileged to be part of 7 of them. I was supposed to come here last year, and I'm in the car, all packed up. I live in Orange County, so I just drive out. It's 4 hours. And all of a sudden, my wife comes out, covered with a bandage, with blood dripping out. She sliced off the top of her fingers. So I had to make an executive decision. Do I stay home and take care of her or disappoint Chris? That was easy. Sorry, Chris. So I'm glad to be here. I thought what I would do is I have a number of topics to talk about. I believe we're going to have a Q&A as well, so we'll do that at the end. Be happy to answer all your questions. But where I want to start is every year we do a compensation study. And I thought I would talk about what lenders make. And this is a benchmark for you as brokers to see what the lenders are doing. And it gives you a little bit of knowledge on that. So what I've done is, we did this, Joseph, this is about the 15th year we've done this?
Yeah.
And we send this out to everyone and they fill it out. And the first thing we identified is there are 4 different tiers. This year, an average producer does up to $10 million, below 10 million, average 10 to 15 million, that's what the lender expects, that's what the bank expects. Above average up to 20 million, then over 25 million are the unicorns and the superstars. And what I found out, or what I determined, is the more a banker, business development officer, brings into that institution, actually it's the lower cost for the lender. And so that's one way to justify these high salaries. The reason why I bring this up is the takeaway for you as a broker is the more business you bring to a specific institution, you should be compensated more. I'll be talking about tiers. But I want to give you an idea what the average compensation is, and there's a number of bankers who are making well over $500,000, that sort of is the ceiling, the $400,000 to $500,000 range. The people I've talked to, once you get above what I call the president's salary or the president of the bank's salary, it's hard to justify that. So there is an inherent cap, and lenders have ways to do that. So as brokers, you have the ability to make much more money, but I'm also putting these out to you is if you're not near these levels, you may want to consider joining the dark side. And you can see compensation continues to increase. What's interesting was last year, compensation increased 20% for what I call below average, which means banks are chasing deals. And I always call it the demand and supply issue. Obviously, we're not talking real estate because we did, this room would be empty and real estate what's down 90%. But in business lending, the supply is there. And what I mean by that, this is not 2009 where lending dried up, is lenders have a capacity to lend money. What's interesting also, we're in an era of, in my history major, back in 2008, 2009, every week we would get the notices on a Friday night of a bank closure. No banks closed last year. And there may have been one, but banks are not closing. Banks have ample liquidity, and even with rising interest rates, they need to park that money. They need to make loans. They can still make more money making loans. So the supply is there. Demand's another issue. Problem is getting the qualified borrowers through the hoops. And fortunately, SB is going to be making some changes, which is hopefully going to make all of our lives easier. But I thought you would get a good idea of what's going on in the industry. So I would say the average compensation of a competent SBA business development officer is about $200,000. That's what you're looking at. There are people who are unicorns that are doing higher than that, but that's about the range that these lenders are doing. Now, also where they're getting their business, that's why they want to cultivate loan brokers, because that is a source of lending. This is a little, I apologize if you can't see it that well, but every year I like to do what keeps you up at night? What are the problems that you have? And last year, I'll read off the column, economy was 19%, lack of qualified borrowers, 8%, and if you look at that, 8%, 2021, it was 30%, and so that has improved. People are able to find the borrowers who need the money. Also, you have to keep in mind what happened was PPP. They were getting that money so they didn't need lending. Competition from other lenders, 23%. Internal logistics, and that's always an issue that really came to a forefront last year with 1 in 3 of them saying, hey, we're having a problem getting loans processed. That affects everyone in this room when there's bottlenecks. Regulators, that was not a concern last year or this year. And the supply-demand argument is average of 12%. So you can see the top-line economy is always one-third. Last year is a little bit less. And I'd like to put these out. One of the reasons also is when you're dealing with those macro issues, it's pretty difficult to blame a macro issue on a micro transaction. At the end of the day, yeah, the overall economic outlook could be poor, but certain industries, certain companies do well. So when you're dealing with a micro transaction, the economy doesn't affect. Yeah, you want to know how all these other things are affecting us. But all the issues that we were complaining about are the horror stories about supply chain. I haven't read about supply chain, but the people I talked to, a friend of mine owns a retail store, a furniture store, and he doesn't have any supply chain issues. He's getting as much inventory as he wants. The retailers are getting all the Christmas stuff they want, not only for this year, but for last year. So we don't read about it. So that one thing pops up, another thing goes away. So I'm certainly not going to sit here and predict where the economy is going, but I would tend to argue on a micro transaction, throw that all out the window. It doesn't make any sense. Now, when you're dealing with lenders, Yes, some of them are constricting their credit boxes, but not by too much. The people I talk to are still making loans, and we just released the 9/30 government numbers, and those are pretty strong in what they're doing. This is important for you. How lenders pay their people are tiers. And base salaries, I argue, are irrelevant. It doesn't make any difference what you have as a base salary. So base salaries are hovering between 75,000 to 125. But in the scheme of things, it's what you can do in terms of loan volume. But as you go up the tier, you make a higher percentage. And that's why this is a typical tier. If you are, I would encourage you, you've heard me speak in past, riches and niches, deal with one or two, preferably one lender. And if you're dealing with one lender, you negotiate higher compensation. Why? Well, first of all, that lender knows you. They've hopefully, quote, trained you on what they want, so there's less overhead, less administrative, less logistical problems with dealing with you as a broker, but then there's a trust factor. So I would encourage you to form a relationship with one lender. If there's something they don't have, yeah, you could have secondary people, but the value is getting up in those tiers. And that's pretty common. Now, it's interesting, there's a couple lenders out there doing something differently. Live Oak Bank, the number one lender, how they pay their people is a flat compensation, flat salary. $300,000. And the reason why they do that is they don't want to be criticized by SBA and the legislatures that people are making money off of this product, which is interesting because everyone else can make money off the product in terms of you can have a job at SBA, you can have a job as a lender, but don't be a greedy loan broker that you're out there doing packaging. And how dare you make money off of this? I've never understood that. So I think it's important to understand why they do that. Now, obviously, if you don't bring any volume, that $300,000 is going to go away the next year. They also do that because they're trying for clawbacks and whatever. Interesting structure. So when you keep this in mind, different lenders have different structures. For example, Wells Fargo will cap a certain amount of compensation. The number I heard was 30,000. That may be a little bit higher today. Now, the interesting thing is this is now history, but when premiums went over 110 up to the pushing 120, which is 20% of the loan amount, and the loan amount was increased to $5 million, several lenders got phone calls saying, I don't want to read from SBA. I don't want to read in the Coleman report that someone's making a $100,000 commission on a loan. So that's why they go about and do certain things. And I think that's sort of for you is how much is too much. I don't know, but there is a number. I can't tell you that number. Just be aware of that. So it's sort of counterintuitive what I'm saying, but if you're out there on an island on a loan broker, you will be scrutinized on that. And SBA has always had a problem with loan brokers. They threaten every year to regulate more and whatever, and that will be coming down. But as a loan broker, you do have targets in your back, and then one of the reasons why is some of the major frauds have been pointed to one loan broker. And this is just a typical salary structure that I gave you. Like, I would say this is probably an average one, base salary 110. You do up to $8 million, you get 1 point, and then you go over 12 million, you get up to 2 points, and that's internal. That's what they mean. So when you're dealing with a loan broker that says I'll only pay 1%, if you're bringing a lot of volume, you certainly have the stats to back you up to negotiate more as the tier goes through. I'm going to switch to PPP. And we've all, before I do that, I want to talk about Every year we do a annual event. We call them the Coleman Top SBA Videos of the Year, and we invite 4 or 5, and we have an event this year. We have it in Phoenix, and then they share what they do, how they're successful. And I want to tell the story of one person. That person has a very specific niche, assisted living. That's all he will do. He's been doing this for 10 years. And he has an attitude of, I am the best of what I do. Therefore, if you come to me, I will tell you what will happen. And he has that type of track record and also that type of persona that you believe him. But he's very strong on how he's successful. He understands the logistics of his lender. So when he makes a commitment on a date, he will say, now things may come up, but I'm pretty sure we can do this. He's firm on price. He says, this is the price, prime 2. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to negotiate. If you want to go somewhere else, but I can get it done. And he's positioning himself as the leader in that industry. And if you want to get an assisted living loan in that particular geography or really nationwide, that's the person you're going to want to talk to. And I would encourage all of you to think about that. The successful business development officers that we had in the room, some of them specialize in smaller loans. Some of them specialize just in warehousing, commercial real estate. And the word gets, as you produce, the word gets around. So strongly encourage you to focus on a niche, whatever it is, whether it's franchising, et cetera, et cetera. I want to talk about PPP. You've heard a lot about fraud. And I think as an industry, we need to address what would have happened if we didn't have this program. True, there is fraud. The good news is the Department of Justice is going after the fraudsters. Remember what happened 10 years ago under TARP? Not one Wall Street banker went to jail. They went after all these community bankers, destroyed lives, and by the way, 10 years later, a lot of these sentences are being overturned or they were found not guilty, but lives are ruined and banks were closed. This time, and they also got the borrowers to testify against the community bankers. This time, they going after the person who committed the crime, which are the fraudsters. And now they are going after some of the bankers. We ran stories on major institutions where people were named, people have been barred from the industry, but they're going after the people who committed the crime. And I think, and I'm absolutely all for that, they should. And the good news is, which you don't read about, is you read about these frauds, but monies are being recovered. There's one story of one person who invested his ill-gotten gains into Bitcoin at the right time, and his portfolio doubled. Well, then the Department of Justice came in and seized the assets, and guess what? The government also got the profit because the source was ill-gotten gains. And so when you see these cars and these yachts and these houses, they are being recaptured. Where does the fraud occur? Oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to talk about defensive PPP. And we gave this year to Senator Marco Rubio our Coleman Main Street Lender of the Year Award. It normally goes to the lender, but this time we gave it to the politician. He's prior head of the Senate Small Business Committee, and he was very clear. If you remember, we figured our history, and something had to be done. Remember what happened in March of 2020? It was zombie land. It was Armageddon. And Congress moved heaven and earth to get this money out to Main Street in 30 days. And his argument is, if we didn't get that money out, is his words, civil unrest. And we forget how bad those times were, and we would have had a terrible recession, if not depression, if all these people had lost their jobs. Now remember, PPP is not for the owners. PPP was able to keep employees, and that is the defense of PPP. And I'm all for nonprofits. I've said if you work for the Catholic Church, yeah, so some dioceses may have gotten it. Well, whether you work for the Catholic Church or you work for a bank, it's a job. So the good news is fraudsters are going to jail. The funds are being recovered, and yeah, there were some bad actors, but we're getting it. But the overwhelming, Monday morning quarterbacking, where you're hearing these saying it was a horrible waste of money, it was not. We need to keep that in the context, in my opinion. I think what's important to understand is what was a fraud. The fraud was very simple. Fake Photoshop tax returns. And if for those of you who are in SBA, if you know the term, the borrower signed the form 1919 where she certified this information was correct in the penalty of perjury. That's what they are getting nailed for, is that false statement. And that's when you hear these convictions, it's lying to the SBA. That's basically what it is. If you want to have fun, Google your local Craigslist and Google tax returns. Google bank statements. And you have some very sophisticated actors who will go, okay, what do you need? I said, well, I need 2 years worth of bank statements for ABC Tooling Inc., showing that I bring in $500,000 a month. What bank? Well, Bank of America. No problem. And they will generate you 12 months worth of bank statements. I need a tax return. So all this documentation, it's sort of the antique dealers. Assume everything is false until you're proven otherwise. You don't assume it's true and then it's false. Assume, okay, how do I know that this stuff is real? And that's very important for you because that's your reputation on the line when you submit these loans to a lender. I do have to tell a couple of fraud stories. The first one, I'm laughing, I shouldn't be laughing, it's terrible. Out of Rhode Island, what he did is he got the money, $1 million. Then he faked his suicide. Drove the car to the beach and left his wallet and stuff on there and took off. But some people said, hey, this guy's a serial fraudster. He didn't really do it. Sure enough, 6 months later, they caught him in Georgia driving a car. So there's these people are being caught, and there's just some wild stories out there, but it comes down to the bottom line is that they lied to the SBA. The problem that you have from a lending standpoint is the False Claims Act. And you need to be careful. Lenders, there's a case, the big fraud with Banker Carrie Aggie's group out of Indianapolis, where she got 5-6 years in jail. But the problem was they went down the chain and they actually sentenced loan closers. They sentenced 5 people who were found guilty. So you have the fraudsters at the top, but the feds went after the entire group. And they got convictions on them. So the problem is that if you're a lower level employee, your boss tells you to do something and your defense cannot be that, well, I was told to do that. No, you sign the statement that you're certified personally that this person's a good character and eligible for a loan, and they were not. And so the problem is if you have now you have a staff full of I get informants. I don't know how to say. Anybody can file a false claim act, plus you get financial incentives. So now you have these lower level employees where you have an institution where anybody can be, quote, work for the government. So what I'm saying is you need to be very clean in all your dealings, because anybody you're dealing with and at the bank or whatever can, quote, turn you in, get a financial reward if they feel that what you're submitting is false. It's called the False Claims Act. And the takeaway is understand the rules. When you're signing something, understand what you're signing, and if you sign something that says, I certify that this person's eligible for a loan, you better be sure that they're eligible. For those of you who do, I know a lot of you do SBA loan packaging. If you're preparing those, even if you're preparing the packages, if you know that some information has been, corners have been cut, have been omitted to make them eligible, you are liable on a couple different levels. And one of the ways you're liable, you could have actually the borrower, which they've done, the borrowers turn false claims against you and against the lenders. So all I'm saying is do the right thing, you're gonna be okay. Don't cut corners. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about new rules. And SBA came out, which is good. And I applaud SBA for this. They want to make the loan process easier because they're concerned about what? What's the option in an SBA loan? The option is predatory lending. That's what they call it. So I don't have to be charged with saying that. And then they will go to the 24-hour immediate funders, and they will get those loans. And I know there's probably some of those here in the room. And they're saying, okay, we understand that our process is way too long, but if you're paying more than prime plus 2%, you're predatory. You know, that whatever. But the good news is they want to make life easier. Okay, so last year or 2 years ago, or whenever I was here last, I talked about submitting loans. They're proposing, this is a proposal, I'm pretty sure most of this will be adopted. They're going to get away with getting the tax returns from family members, which was, as they said, it was a chilling effect. What they were concerned about is in primary ethnic communities, Indian community, where dad was going to have a daughter get a hotel loan, and now they're saying if the daughter owns it, we don't need dad's information, which is good. Because then they were getting dad and they were getting kids, they wanted all this stuff, and they're going to simplify that. The second thing they're proposing is franchising. They're not going to do away with the franchise registry, but basically they're going to do away with it. So you're going to have a situation that the lender has more and more ability to make those determinations themselves rather than rely on the registry. So the things they're talking about are streamlining. And that's good news. It's not in effect yet. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but be aware that that will happen. SBA is supposed to come out with a new SOP, quote, last week of October, first week of November. Joseph, what day is it? November, so this is a Thursday. So good news, this is going to come out tomorrow, right? No. So there'll be a new SOP, and we expect to see some of these. We're going to see further and further streamlining. But remember, streamlining is good, and they're going to do that. But we need to be aware of the big picture. Make sure that the people you're submitting the stuff, that they're legitimate and there's not fraud. I want to change subjects to California. How many of you do business in California? Make loans. How many of you are aware of the December 9th rule? I got one. California is, I'm from California, so I can say this. They are flexing their muscles as the 6th or 7th largest economy in the world, and basically saying, hey, we're our own sovereign nation, and we're going to do whatever we want to do. And they're doing it. One of the things they're doing is they formed something called the Department of Financial Innovation and Protection, which I love those two words together, innovation and protection. Anyway, they are going to regulate lenders, just as California years ago established all these small guidelines for cars that everyone adopted. They're going to regulate small business lenders. They're going to require disclosures. This has been passed, approved, sealed, ready to be delivered on December 9th. So if you get a small business loan, if you're a lender in the state of California, you must disclose what you would normally expect on consumer lending disclosures. Rate, term, APR, monthly payments, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a bank, you're exempt. So it only, and if you're a credit union, you're exempt. So it's going to affect state-regulated banks, state-regulated SNLs, non-bank lenders. All those people are going to be required to disclose that. So that's here. We're starting to cover that. We have a website on that, and that's, it's in place. It's going to be adopted. The good news is, I'm not going to talk about the election. I have no idea what's going to happen, other than whatever happens is not going to be a negative for SB. It's funding, and I'm not worried about that. I do want to give a plug. Let's say I got two more things here. I do want to give a plug for USDA. How many of you are involved with USDA lending? It is a great, great program. They've streamlined it. It's for rural America. And the good news is you're dealing with franchise restaurants. They've maxed out on SBA, which is a 3.75 guarantee. And now they want to build something going on Vegas up to Salt Lake City, up in on St. George or whatever. That's all rural. And you can get a hotel, you can do whatever type of financing you want for small business loans in using that program. And that program, you can go up to $10 million relatively easily. There's a lot of advantages for the lender. One is there is no, what I call a premium tax. The premiums are similar to SBA, and the lender gets to keep all those premiums, plus the larger loans. I would strongly encourage you to take a look at your footprint and consider those larger loans. And USDA will fund broker fees directly on the proceeds. So they protect the brokers. It's an excellent program. I do want to give a plug on the one, for those of you who weren't here a couple years ago, the best piece of advice you can get all day. Write this down. You can go to sba.gov FOIA, F-O-I-A. There you will have spreadsheets. You can get every loan down to every loan by name, bank, amount, for NAICS code, bank address, the address of the business, for every loan made since 1990. And therefore, in turn, so you can say, my footprint is Nevada, is Las Vegas. I can do a search for every real estate loan, 25-year loan that was made in Las Vegas between 2013 and 2018. I can get those addresses, and then I can go ahead and contact those people because they're now in their rates have been going up, and maybe I have a fixed rate product I can give them. If you don't have Excel spreadsheet skills, go to Fiverr, Fivrr. You can hire people to do spreadsheets, calculations at very minimal cost, and that data is there. We use that data to compile our reports, and we sell that product. But if you want to do an individual thing in your footprint, you can find it. You can also have the statistics of the loan was paid off or not. It was charged off. So there's a lot of good information. Finally, I want to give a plug. Please, every Monday and Friday, we do a live stream show. It's on YouTube. It's Coleman Report. Send me an email, bob@colemanreport.com, and I'll be happy to sign you up for that. And we don't charge for that. 20 minutes, we talk about the industry. And with that, Chris, I am through with my comments. How'd I do on time? Oh, 9:41, I'm good. I'd love to take some questions.
Email.
Oh, bob@colemanreport.com. I apologize.
How do you spell?
B-O-B. Go to the first. Oh, I have the slide. Here we go. There we go. bob@colemanreport.com.
Can you repeat the YouTube?
Joseph, I don't think.
YouTube.com/Coleman Report.
YouTube/Coleman Report. And you can go to that and you can sign up directly and that's easy. I'm sorry, my hearing is not all that
FOIA
good.
website.
Pardon?
The FOIA website.
FOIA website? It is SBA, it's on SBA.gov. Type in SBA.gov FOIA loan stats. Something along those lines, and there'll be a number of spreadsheets on that, and there's just a wealth of information there.
Hey, Bob, I'm
Yes.
signed up for your weekly report that we get. But I didn't see the breakout that you had in your deck. If I sent you an email, would you send me your deck?
Absolutely.
Man, that's valuable stuff.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, that was easy. Great.
Any other questions, folks, for Bob? Are we happy? All right, well, please give a round of applause for Bob.
Yeah, good job.
All right, I just need everybody to sit tight. I need our next session is our Learn from Successful Broker panel, one of the most anticipated panels here today. So I need the brokers that are on the panel to please meet me over by the audio people to get you mic'd up. Everybody just stay in the room. Give us about 2-3 minutes to mic our brokers up, and then we're going to proceed with this panel. So give us like